The story of Amanda Knox has been marked by controversy from the very beginning. She's been accused, convicted, and finally acquitted of the brutal murder of her roommate Meredith Kircher while they were students in Italy. And while legal experts have said that hard evidence against her was shaky at best, Amanda has found herself being convicted in the public eye because of her behavior, especially in the early stages of the investigation. Her Italian prosecutors put a spotlight on what they saw as Amanda's lack of emotion to bolster their case. She's been called too serious, too logical, heartless, cold, and calculating, behavior that prosecutors have insisted is evidence of her guilt. Lisa Ray Preston is a brain patterning specialist who has a different take on Amanda's much criticized behavior. Lisa is the creator of the Step into Destiny Core Brilliance Test and author of Communicating from the Core. Lisa, you've done a lot of research on how brain patterns affect our actions, our perceptions, our responses to different events. What do you see when you watch Amanda Knox in interviews?
Thanks, Dina. You know, when I saw the interviews with Knox, I was troubled about all of the comments regarding her unemotional expression and how that caused her to appear guilty. To me, the question is Knox's behavior and demeanor indicative of guilt, or is it simply normal based on her brain pattern? There are a lot of women who are logical, unemotional, and objective. That's their core design, not a sign of mental disturbance. So I was taken by the rash judgments of Knox's behavior as being cold, heartless, and odd. Her words, her actions were actually quite normal, congruent, and explainable based on simple brain patterning. People show remorse very differently based on their core pattern. Some people's emotions are always written right on their face, and others process their emotions more cerebrally and don't wear their feelings on their sleeves.
So what do you mean by a brain pattern?
Well, our brains cycle through 4 different patterns every 1 to 2 seconds, and we're more drawn to one pattern over the others because it's the most fun for us. So we tend to choose to behave from that pattern most often. So here are the cores we found from our research. The service core brilliance pattern is a take action now mindset. The truth pattern responds to life in a prove it to me way. The empathy pattern desires to soothe and nurture a person's feelings. And the potential pattern prefers to look at the potential of a person or situation.
And which brain pattern do you think Amanda Knox operates from?
Based on her verbal and body language, it appears that Amanda Knox operates from the truth core brain pattern. 70% of men are truths, 30% of women. As I watched interviews, I noticed Knox seemed to go into her head to decipher emotion, and her voice tone followed the same changes in tenor as a truth's would the more objective she became. Truth women are logical and objective and more comfortable with facts over feelings. They do feel very deeply and often champion others in specific causes. Truths are not cold and heartless. They simply process emotion in a more cerebral way than an emotional way. For instance, when she makes a statement about barely knowing Meredith Kircher, it seems strange, callous, proposed Diane Sawyer in an interview with Knox. Does how you reacted look hardened, unfeeling, she asked. And Knox simply said, I can see how it does. But was she actually unfeeling, or merely, as truths do, stating a fact without emotion attached?
Diane Sawyer also asked her about another comment that she made to friends regarding Meredith Kircher's throat being cut. That also sounded callous to people.
Yes, but you have to realize that as a truth, Knox could have made that comment as a factual point out of frustration, especially if the friend's first comment seemed redundant or obvious. So separated from the context of the core pattern of a person, the comment can appear cruel. But seen from the truth perspective, it's just a statement of what is. Truths are objective and describe what they see.
So from your research, Lisa, you think that Amanda Knox's behavior and comments are completely in line with what you call the truth personality type or brain pattern?
That's right. From the truth pattern, her pauses before comments are completely normal because those who operate from their truth core like to make sure that the words they choose are the best words to illustrate exactly what they're thinking or feeling. Knox's words themselves and her reaction to the crime scene are completely valid when viewed from her brain pattern. Most truth women I interview speak of feeling falsely accused of being heartless when they have the full range of emotion but aren't comfortable showing it. One woman who helps raise funds for orphanages in Kenya said to me, "You know, if a man is a truth, he's called a leader, strong, intelligent. But if a woman is a truth, she's termed uncompassionate, even cruel. I've felt misunderstood and judged all my life." Yet one cannot assume guilt due to a lack of expression. The truth is that a person's character is not measurable based on his or her ability to emote in public. Stating facts without emotions does not make a person heartless. It makes the person a thinker. We celebrate the truth brain pattern in female lawyers, congresswomen, policewomen. We say we would be careful of electing a female president who was too emotional. But when it comes to putting people on trial, we demand they show remorse in a certain way, and if they don't, they're guilty.
And you believe that Amanda was feeling emotions that never actually made it to her face?
Exactly. It's important to note that remorse isn't always expressed on the face of the person, but that does not mean the person is not agonizing inside her head.
Now, Amanda herself has admitted that some of her responses were selfish and immature.
Yes, and those words would describe all of our behavior at some point in our lives. But in reference to her lack of emoting, there are many women out there watching these interviews thinking, I'd have responded in some of the ways Knox did. What would society think of me? And I'd like to encourage the 30% of women who have the truth brilliance pattern to know that your design is valid and valuable. And you may be struggling silently or not so silently for being accused of looking less compassionate due to the tendency to keep vulnerable emotions private. But your ability or non-ability to emote in public does not define who you are. So please don't allow the accusations that women who don't freely emote in public mean they're cruel and heartless diminish your worth, because that statement isn't true. Whatever you think of Knox's guilt or innocence, form your opinion around as many of the facts as you can. One more fact is that one cannot tell how deeply another person is feeling based on their facial expressions and voice tone. There is a specific core design, a brain pattern, that is wonderful and valuable where someone focuses more on the facts than feelings in dealing with life. These same people often champion great and worthy causes and are committed protectors. They do not have an ease in expressing emotions, and that's normal.
Now, in her case, knowing that her roommate had been murdered, being questioned by the police, is incredibly stressful and fraught with emotion. People would think emotions would overwhelm her and just come out, as they eventually did during her trial. Would a stressful or overwhelming situation make it more or less likely for a truth pattern person to express those emotions?
Interestingly, Dina, truths tell me they rarely, if ever, cry when sad. But when completely overwhelmed or when they're feeling confused about something and can't find clarity, that's when tears come. So the fact that you don't find Amanda crying about the death of a roommate, but crying with the moment of freedom when she's not fully processed all the situation and what it means for her next step in life, this is a lack of clarity, it makes perfect sense. 30% of women function this way. It's a normal, valid, valuable, and purposeful design.
Now, the Italian police and the justice system there have been widely criticized for biases in the Knox case. But setting aside any problems that might have occurred there, what are some of the signs or the signals that police could have picked up on while questioning Amanda? That she's not actually someone who's guilty, but rather someone who deals with emotions and stress much more cerebrally.
Well, each of these core brain patterns is kind of like a different culture with different traditions and understandings. And the more information you have about how the cultures think, the more you understand their actions. So when talking with somebody in a stressful situation, their core pattern stands out loudly and clearly. So if the police had been trained in brain patterning, they could have, from Amanda Knox's language, identified a truth pattern. Then, the scene of her kissing her boyfriend, one could interpret the look on her face as trying to figure out what was going on, not assume that she was unfeeling. When a truth is processing cerebrally, she's not going to show that emotion on her face. Then her immediate desire to cooperate with the police and tell them all that she knew at the scene would have been understood as the truth desire to bring clarity and tell all the facts that they know. By her non-emotional nature, they'd assume she was cerebrally processing to bring as much clarity to the situation as she could. When Amanda acted playfully in the courtroom, the authorities would have known, okay, this kid has no clue of the severity of this issue. She doesn't understand the facts. Let's explain to her clearly in her native tongue what is happening. There would have been no assumption of guilt apart from the actual evidence or lack thereof.
It's incredibly interesting, Lisa. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Lisa Ray Preston from StepIntoDestiny.com.